I'll start. All right. I'd like to welcome you all. I'm Ehsan Jalal, the Education and Programming Chair of ICF Oman chapter. I welcome Linda, who will be our facilitator today. I'll introduce her a little later. And also like to welcome President of ICF Oman chapter, Ghayal Barwani, our Vice President, Caroline, our Vice President or Chair of PR and Marketing, Gurbinder, and of course, Benita, who is the founder of ICF Oman chapter, and everyone else who has joined for this particular session. Before I introduced Linda, I will request Gaya to just say a few words to and open the session. Gaya, over to you.
Welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to see you all and to have you all here. Thank you very much, Linda, for coming and talking about my favorite subject in coaching, which is establishing and maintaining an agreement. I always say it's the cornerstone of what we do. Otherwise, it's not really a coaching conversation, is it? So please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raya. So as you know, today we have this session on establishes and maintains agreements, which is the competency number 3. And being facilitated by Linda. Linda, most of us know, but just for the formality, I'll give a brief introduction about her. She's an FCC and award-winning master coach and founder of Leadership Works, specializing in coach training, executive education, and gender intelligence. Linda is former vice chair of ICF Professional Coaches Board of Directors from 2019 to 2021. In 2013, she became the first ever recipient of ICF Impact Award as Distinguished Coach Educator and also awarded Mentor Coach of the Year by Coach Foundation. Previously, she won Coach of the Year and Mentor Coach of the Year honors in 2017 from ICF Ireland. Linda is an accredited master certified coach and a licensed facilitator of a range of psychometrics. She's based between Dublin and Dubai. Linda was a previous board member of ICF Ireland chapter and is active in the UAE chapter. Linda is an expert in executive and leadership development and has worked across Europe, the Middle East, Africa, USA, and South America. She's co-author of 2 books on leadership and change, and an engaging conference speaker on coaching and leading. She's also a Reiki master and avid traveler. Apart from that, as you know, she won the Impact Award as an educator, and I have the honor of being coached by her. And let me tell you, it was a phenomenal experience. My training was in COVID times, and I was thinking that how I would attend full day sessions. It was so many, I think 8 or 9 days of full day session. I was really worried. But believe me, I did not feel how the time, I never felt for a moment to be disconnected. And if I look back, I don't feel that was an online session. I feel it was an in-person session. So that is the kind of aura Linda has. And today, I'm sure you'll benefit a lot from this particular session. And she taught us in the session, apart from the other competencies of how to establish and maintain agreements, which I think one of the foundational competencies, because if you do that well, then the coaching session progresses quite well. So with that little introduction, I will hand over to Linda to take it forward.
Oh, good evening, everybody. And thank you, Ehsan. And thank you, Raya, for your kind words. And absolutely kudos to ICF Oman. I believe you're one of the fastest growing chapters in the Middle East. And you are so active, doing so many different events and hosting the Prism Award recently. So great to have everybody here with us in the room. And when Ehsan reached out to me and asked, would I do a session and which core competency would I like to focus on, I didn't hesitate but to say number 3, establishes and maintains agreements, because like Raya, I really truly believe it is at the cornerstone of what we do as coaches. And, you know, as a coach educator for the past 8 years, I find that with aspiring coaches, maybe this core competency is the most challenging for newbies to really embrace and understand. And I guess I'm someone who likes a challenge, so maybe that's also why I really enjoy this core competency. I'm going to start by making some kind of general comments about competency number 3, managing agreements. But throughout the session, I'm really going to zone in on one aspect in particular, which is about how we create agreements with organizations where we're doing coaching programs and coaching packages. It is a more complex level of managing agreements, but it's one that I find as a mentor coach, many of my mentees ask about, because it is both an ethical minefield and it is a coaching minefield. So just some general comments first. The word partnering is hugely, hugely important when it comes to this core competency. And as you know, this is the definition of what core competency number 3 is. And under that, there are actually 11 sub-bullet points. And the only other competency within the 8 competency framework that has so many subsets, if you like, is creating awareness. So I think this also underlines the complexity of it. And when you look into those 11 bullet points that form this competency, 7 of those begin with the verb partners. So that is telling us something. It's about how we as coaches, in a non-directive, collaborative way, work with our clients to create something of value together. And we create the relationship together. Now, as I say, it's a huge core competency, and I have perhaps isolated the 4 sub-bullets that you see on the screen, number 1, number 2, number 4, and number 8. I will probably, throughout my session, make the deepest reference to those, but I will touch on the others as we go through. If I was to encapsulate the whole core competency that ICF has defined, I would distill it into the 4 Ps. So whether we are doing one-to-one coaching with an individual client, or whether we are managing a coaching program for 50 senior leaders within an organization, we will still need to attend to the 4 Ps. And the first is simply the procedural aspect, which is, I think, very, very straightforward. You know, how much are the sessions? When do we meet? Do we meet online? Do we meet in person? What's my cancellation policy? Who's scheduling? How do we schedule? How frequent are the sessions? How do we terminate our coaching agreement? And I think they are covered under bullets 3 and 11 within the ICF definition. The second aspect is what I call the professional, which is around agreeing what is appropriate in a coaching relationship, what coaching is, what it isn't, what the coach can do, what the coach can't do, what are the respective responsibilities of the coachee and the client and the coach, and how reporting, particularly if it is a large-scale coaching program in company, what is the reporting protocol so that everything is upfront and transparent. And here I think that the professional part is covered by bullets 1 and 2 within the ICF definition. The third is the psychological. And really, this is covered by what we would typically call the chemistry meeting. You know, is there a comfort level? Is there a trust level between the coach and the coachee? Are we an effective match or not? Sorry, is there a problem with sound, or is everything going okay?
It's okay. Please continue. I'll see if
Okay. I just heard something and thought maybe.
Maybe someone unmuted by mistake, but please continue.
So the psychological aspect is very crucial, because as the relationship develops and we want to build trust, and the person wants to open up to us even further and be more vulnerable, we have to feel that connection right at the start. And so I think bullet 5 and bullet 11, which is how we honor and close out the session, is equally important. And they're very much part of this psychological part, which is around fit. And the final P here is performance. So, what are the overarching goals going to be, whether it's for an individual client or a corporate client or a team client? What are the overall goals? Then what are the mini goals within each session? What kind of outcomes? How will we measure success? What type of actions do we want to come out of sessions? And how do we create forward movement? So all of that is also part of this core competency number 3. And what we can see in how I've mapped my model with the ICF definition is that a lot of the sub-bullets actually, and especially many of them that use the word partner, come onto this performance aspect. So they're the 4 Ps. Now, the 4 Ps, I guess, have 2 dimensions. And one is what I call the macro level, and the other is the micro level. So at the macro level, we're looking at the fit, the chemistry, the overall logistics. We're looking at the macro level also at what are the high level goals of the intervention. But the micro level is what we do in each and every session with our coachee. How we start our session, usually to find what is the area of focus that coachee would like to bring to the table on that particular session. So we're all familiar with these types of questions. And I guess you all have your favorite questions that you ask when you're starting a session. And perhaps as an ICF assessor and a mentor to people going for credentials, this would be the one area that I find coaches often tend to rush. They may ask 1 or maybe just 2 quite cursory questions about what the client or coachee wants to achieve, and then gets into the session immediately. And I really think, if it takes 15, 20 minutes, even longer, to get that clear focus right, it's worth the investment of time. The other thing I would say about micro level agreement making, which is, remember, that's the agreement we make when we're in the actual session, that we can partner at the start, we can partner at any point during the session, and we can partner to finish and close out the session as well. So it's not just something, it's not a competency that's just there for the first 5 minutes. It actually runs as a silver thread through the whole session. So I particularly, urge people to check in at least once or twice during the session with their clients, if they're using this competency correctly, and say things like, how are we doing? To what extent are you on track with what you want to get out of the session? What are your insights so far? What do we need to add here to the session? So just always do that check-in, equally part of it. And if the client wants to change focus at that point, just start the recontracting process again. And equally towards the end, invite your client to close out the session and to, in fact, identify the insights and the impact for them from that session. Now, I'm not going to say too much more about micro level contracting, because I'm assuming that most of us in the room do know that. However, if any of you have questions on the micro level, please feel free to pop those in the chat function or raise them at the end when we have open mic. And Asan, please interrupt me if there's any clarifications that come up and people need. Just feel free to interrupt me. And I'll deal with it, okay? So I'm going to park, if that's okay, the micro. And I'm coming back now to macro. And macro is the bigger picture. So first of all, you may be aware of the ICF consumer study that happens every 3 years. And the more recent one that came out, I think last year, the middle of last year. And it's an interesting thing, who pays for coaching? And what we're seeing is a greater trend for coaching to be procured and paid for by organizations. The trend, we are told, is to see more growth in the market by organizations wanting to provide coaching to their employees. And we certainly know that Gen Ys, Gen Zs are people who expect to be coached as part of their work life. You know, it's not an added extra. It's not something fancy for them. It's just a basic expectation. So bear those figures in mind, because as we think of core competency number 3, in the context of an organization, it altogether becomes much, much more complicated and complex. Now, just to put coaching in organizations in context, again, to quote from another ICF study, the global study that's done every 4 years. And in 2022, you see that it was a $4.5 billion industry, coaching, executive coaching. And that was a 60% increase over the prior study. So the growth is phenomenal. And we do know that the highest spend is coming from organizations. So that's why coaches today need to understand how to make agreements with organizations. Many organizations that I'm working with currently are on the road to creating a coaching culture. And therefore, they will be seeking external coaches, internal coaches, leaders as coaches to build that for them. And I'm not going to spend too long on this, but it's just by way of context that when you're invited in to work with an organization, you may actually be part of the coaching culture creation process. So that is something you have to keep at the back of your mind all the time. And, you know, a coaching culture has at least 5 of the following: employees value coaching, senior executives value coaching, managers and leaders have been given accredited training, there is a dedicated budget. Number 5, all employees have equal access to coaching, not just the elites. And organizations leverage at least 3 of the coaching modalities. So a coaching culture would be a company that has 5 of these. So you may be part of helping them create that. Now, what are the challenges? Because we know when organizations invest in something, learning and development or product development, whatever it is they're investing in, they're looking for a return on investment or a return on experience. And the same will go when they're investing in coaching. And so we still know with a lot of organizations, there's market confusion. So, you know, as a coach, you may get requests from companies saying, oh, we'd love you to come in and help our leaders. And once you get there, you realize they really want a consultant, or they want a trainer, or they want a mentor. They don't actually want coaching. And this is again coming back to how we create the agreement. That is number one in that core competency. Also, there can be budgetary constraints. Right now, 24% of organizations say they have a fixed cost line for coaching. Now, I think there probably is a much higher number of organizations that have a large learning and development budget, and coaching may not be isolated as a fixed line, but it would be covered. So it may be a higher one. But it's not a bottomless pit of money. So if they're going to say, well, do we invest in e-learning, or do we invest in training, or will we invest in coaching? They're going to want some data and some return on investment or return on experience to validate that spend. And of course, we have the old chestnut that there is a lack of credentials and certifications, that, our industry is open to all. So I think that by showcasing core competency 3, ICF coaches can create more credibility for themselves in the marketplace, even at the very start, in just how they negotiate the agreement. You can stand head and shoulders above some of our colleagues who are so-called coaches. Let me just put it that way. Now, I mentioned that a coaching culture will use the 3 coaching modalities. And by that, we mean that they will hire in external coach practitioners. And maybe I'd invite our audience. I see we've 22 people online at the moment. Welcome, everybody. So would you just identify, are you an external? Do you sell into companies? Or are you an internal coach? Just put in internal. Or maybe you're both external and internal. Or are you a manager who uses coaching skills? You don't coach full time, but you do have a coach-like approach to managing staff. You have regular coaching style conversations with your team and with your people. So just identify yourself. And Asan, you might let me know what we mainly have in the room. So external, internal, write both if you do both. Or are you a manager using coaching skills? We call that a MUCCS, M-U-C-C-S. Now.
Yeah, we have a mix of both external and internal, and 2 of them have said coach as a manager.
Excellent. So again, and I think we probably need another absolute webinar on how internal coach practitioners make agreements, because again, there is a very particular challenge when you are employed by the company. You are coaching people within that company and dealing with very confidential situations and maybe performance situations. So how you manage the agreement is crucial there. Perhaps many of my comments I think what I'll talk about will still be of relevance to internal coaches, but they're going to be particularly relevant to the external coach who's coming in from outside. So this is what we're calling multi-party agreements, which is the complicated, messy part of core competency 3. So this means that it's not just me, Linda, coaching Asan, for instance, and I just have a 2-way agreement. He's my client. He pays me. We schedule together. It is important to have an agreement, but it is simpler to manage the direct clients or coaches. The multi-party agreements usually have 3 parties to them. We have the coach. What is the coach's rights and responsibilities? within the agreement. We will have the client, and by that I mean the person who is paying and managing the program. Now, that person could be HR, they could be L&D, they could be CEO, they could be COO. It's just someone who isn't directly receiving the coaching from you, but is managing it on behalf of the organization. And then at the other side, you have what I will call the coachee, the person that you meet in the sessions. Now, that could be one-on-one, or it could be a team. So in the ideal world, our triangle will look like this. It will have equal sides, so everybody has an equal share in the power in the relationship. The dynamic is transparent, it's open, it's working very, very well. And there are very clear lines. There's no blurred lines. What I have to do as coach is clear. What the client, overall client, has to do is clear. What the other coachee, team coachee, or individual coachee has to do is clear. And that really is an art form, let me tell you, to make this multi-party agreement so equal and so clear, where we honor everybody's needs. Unfortunately, sometimes we end up with that explosion type figure on the other side when there's so many people involved that the lines are unclear. There's no symmetry in the relationship. So this is what I'm talking about now in terms of multi-party agreements that create a solid platform within Core Competency 3. So the big question is, how as a coach, if you're invited in, imagine this, you're invited into an organization. I've just been invited to do one with 35 senior leaders and 10 teams. So can you imagine the scale of that? But it could be, sometimes I'm doing programs, just 5, maybe senior leaders, whatever it is. So the first thing to find out before I ever meet any of the coachees is, what is the context for the coaching program? So by that, I mean, is it part of an overall leadership development drive? Is it part of an onboarding process? Is it part of a talent management process where they're identifying high potential people to be promoted? Is it just a new CEO has come in who's kind of a fan of coaching and wants their people to be coached? So always ask, why coaching? Why now? And also, what other modalities have you looked at? What else are you leveraging at this moment, as well as coaching? Because maybe coaching isn't what is required right now. So the context, who owns it? Where will the ultimate responsibility for the management of the company sit? So as the coach, who are you dealing with? Who is going to agree how the coachees are selected, how they're scheduled? Who will you go to if there is an issue, any ethical issues with some of the coachees? Who will sign off on your invoice? Who will you report to? You really need to know that. And that might seem very obvious, but I would say the person who makes an assumption on that, you could find yourself in sticky water. And again, you know, maybe why I'm talking to you about this is that, you know, I've been in this game for many years and I've had my fingers burnt. And what I'm sharing with you now are the lessons I've learned from earlier mistakes of rushing in without having this clarity. The other thing you need to understand is, what are the drivers? So the driver could be, we're going through massive transformation in this organization, or we're part of a merger and acquisition, or the industry is changing. You look at maybe many of the traditional oil and gas companies, and with the whole sustainability agenda, the climate change agenda, the drivers for coaching programs are really very, very interesting. So you need to, as a coach, to make your agreement work, you really need to check, have I got a copy of the strategic plan? Do I know the KPIs? Do I have the competency framework for the people that I'm going to be coaching? Do I understand the industry? I don't have to be an expert, but I have to understand what is the raison d'etre for this coaching program, so that I can then calibrate the sessions in terms of the goal setting process. The other three things that perhaps at this initial stage of doing the agreement, you need to understand is, what is the prior experience in this company of having coaching interventions? You know, do they do this all the time, or are you the first? Because that will tell you where you need to start. If you're the first coming in, you have to go very slowly. You have to tread very carefully, because maybe there aren't policies. So you have to understand their expectations, their awareness of coaching, their understanding of what it is and what it isn't. And again, there can be, in my experience, a lot of education to be done with that HR department or that CEO that is hiring you in. So check out prior experience. The other thing to check out is what other HR or organization development initiatives are happening at the same time as the coaching program. I remember one time being invited in by a big company in Dubai, and when I asked them what else is going on, oh, they were rolling out a mentoring program. They were revamping their appraisal system. And, you know, in the end, I thought, this isn't the time to launch a coaching program. Let's wait. Let's wait till the appraisal system is in, it's embedded, then we will begin the coaching. Because sometimes it's just too much going on, and they're not going to have the time and attention to support it. And it will be initiative overload for the target audience. And finally, you really, really have to work on the impact. What would success look like from if they put 50 people through, senior leaders through a coaching program for 1 year? So what are they looking for at the end of that? And how can you create value? Now, I will show you in a minute some impacts and success factors you can talk about. Now, once you have cleared the decks and had all those great conversations around the context and the drivers and the ownership, you then can start designing how the program will work, how people will be selected for the program, how they'll be briefed for the program, how they will be, if they need to do any prior assessment center or development center, feedback 360, whatever, to bring in to shape the coaching program. And one of the best things I find is, how do we align our coaching program with the strategic ambition and initiative within the organization? And the best way to get alignment is to suggest three-way pre- and post-coaching conversations. Three-way, I mean, you will have the coachee with you, and their line manager. And you will have a discussion and a negotiation on to what are the main goals of this program. What would be the 3-4 big ticket goals that they would like to have included? And how would they measure the impact? Equally, at the end of the program, a 3-way conversation, exit type conversation is wonderful to look at the growth of the coachee and for them to be able to be with their line manager to hear that and to get that feedback. Now, obviously, there is a cost to this, and it's something I would cost and put into my proposal to a company. But it has, in my experience, been one of the biggest keys to success to get this alignment and ensure that the coachee isn't working on something without support from the system in which they're working. It also kind of develops the trust, I think, and the understanding and awareness of coaching within the organization by doing that. I can come back and say more about that later on, but I truly recommend that. Now, sometimes they'll say, look, we don't have the budget, Linda. That's fair enough. So in that case, I encourage the coachee to set up a time to discuss with their line manager the goals they've set and to get input. So they can do that offline without me. But somehow I think when it's the facilitated conversation with the coach, it does go that bit deeper. Now, in terms of impacts and success, you can, we will try to measure the coaching program itself. We will get feedback on the coach's performance. We can use 360s, for instance, to see what was the leader's performance before and after. There's things we can do, if you like, to measure how effective the coaching program was. But equally, if the goals of the organization are reflected at some level within the individual conversations, we can begin to use what I call proxy success measures. So what we would see maybe is through climate surveys that motivation or morale has improved. Maybe the performance management system on an annual level, when it's aggregated, would show better leadership or better people skills performance overall. We can use the business's KPIs, are there more sales, more satisfied customers, more innovation, whatever, retention rates, have health and safety. Again, I did a major coaching initiative within Maersk, the logistics company, and with their health and safety professionals. And again, the whole idea was how can they have coaching conversations with their stakeholders to make sure that safety is improved, employee engagement or absent. So again, depending on how you set up your program and you align it, you can suggest to the owner of the program, whoever it is you're reporting into, that they would use this. Another company we work with, our organization, Sharjah Police, they use the happiness survey that the federal government issue every year. And since they've introduced a coaching culture, they have seen year on year their happiness rates rise. So it can be done. And just, here are some other ideas. I want to leave some time for questions now, but you can see you can use business and HR related type KPIs or environmental type KPIs, and just looking at the organization holistically, I guess, is saying, okay, what is the impact of the coaching on that individual in their role in the organizational context? And that's where you get that systematic and systemic impact. Now, you can see that this type of agreement setting at the organization level is not something that happens in a blink of an eye. It takes quite a bit of meeting. And again, you know, you can charge for some of that in the first instance, especially if you're doing it in a kind of consulting way that helps them build out the coaching program so that it will have maximum impact. Now, just my last words before I open up for questions is when we're doing team level coaching agreements, this again is complex because we're not just agreeing the goals with one individual and perhaps their line manager. We may have up to 15 people in the room. So again, when I'm doing team coaching, I always ask as part of my proposal that I will speak to all or a representative number from the team one-to-one before I have my first meeting with that team. So I create a structured interview process and I gather data. And from that, I have an idea of the expectations of the team at an individual level, their readiness for coaching, their fears, their concerns. And in that way, I'm able to develop the agreement with that team when I go into the first meeting much better prepared. And you know, your first meeting and sometimes your first 2-3 meetings with the team can be just around competency 3, creating that agreement and creating something that's mutually beneficial and where the trust is right. So my words are always to my mentees and my students, go slower at the start to go faster later on. Because if we don't attend to core competency 3, it can be an ethical minefield. We can get into situations that we never dreamt of. So for now, maybe I will just say, thank you. It's a big subject. I've probably covered too much material as always, but trying to give value and just food for thought. So at that, I'll stop, Asan, and let you take any questions or comments. Or I'd love to hear what others do in these situations.
Right. So you can unmute and ask questions, or you can even put in the chat.
Actually, thank you.
Okay. Please raise hands so that I know who wants to speak. I request you. Yeah, so Lena, please go ahead.
First of all, sorry if I unmute myself while I'm in the garage. Sorry, okay. In the car maintenance. Okay. So thank you, Linda, for the webinar, for the information. Actually, I just joined the team coaching, and I was wondering how it will look like, the agreement. I was like waiting for that time to study and to learn more about how we were gonna do the team agreement, team coaching agreement. So صراحة, it was interesting today, the webinar. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
James, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks, Linda. That's probably, well, it actually is the best I've ever been at in terms of a coaching webinar, and the amount of experience that came through there and the amount of information that was so useful. Just one observation and one question. One observation, you talked about the micro level and spending time on the goals. I went through a whole diploma program and I never knew about the to grow model. It was always the grow model, but there was never the to for the topic, and spending time on that before you go near the grow model. So, you know, thanks for that. The other thing was, I suppose, how much time do you spend on that negotiation side, on the proposals? How, like, just in a ballpark as regards time frame, and how long would a ballpark proposal be for you, you know, in terms of pages for, say, maybe 5 managers or whatever it is, just to get an idea of that?
I guess, thank you. Thank you, James, a fellow countryman. I think it's all about context. It's very hard to say how long. It depends if the company has done coaching before. You may find that they have template agreements. You may find that they have the policies ready to go, and therefore it would be a simpler process for you. However, many companies have none or little experience of dealing with a professional coach. They may have had coaches before, but they may not have been professional. And therefore, it just takes longer. My advice is start asking your curious questions at the beginning. Don't make any assumptions. And then take as long as you need to make everything clear. And, you know, sometimes you have to create the written agreement. You will put it because, again, for ICF coaches, we are urged with more complex agreements to have those in writing. So that could take time to write up. But again, in my experience, many of the bigger companies who have experience, they will have their own agreement that they ask you to sign off on. So I'm sorry, there isn't a simple answer to that.
That's fine.
Guess it depends.
Thank you.
Of using
Thank you.
And that is a great question, actually, Munira. If a third party has asked you to coach somebody, you need to establish with them, has this idea come from them, or where does it come? Has the person been spoken to about, are they ready for coaching? Are they willing for coaching? So I think you can't take on anything without knowing that the person is willing and able. And nobody can be coached against their will. So, and yet what you're so right, because sometimes HR find it hard to deal with difficult situations, and they'll try to get a coach to sort it for them when it's really a HR issue, a discipline issue. So I think if you know, what will it's our ethical responsibility to step back from the coaching for the time being, at least.
Any other add?
Hope that's clear. Morella.
Linda, I was just going to ask a question related to, you know, measurements of the success of the coaching that one is doing in an organization. You'll get HR or L&D, for example, you know, who may have established an understanding of what coaching is and what the impact impact of coaching maybe, but yet at the upper level, at the more senior CEO sort of level that needs to sign off on a coaching proposal may not, may want to see, or they may have to present the actual return on investment or return on expectation. Now, you'll find with some organizations, they're not really, they haven't got any specific questions or surveys that are really earmarked to measure the impact of coaching. In terms of, they may have employee engagement surveys, but these are really generic with no specific questions that can capture the impact of coaching. And it does take time to actually change the questions in these surveys and capture something. What would you suggest? I know you shared a number of ways that you could measure this, and if a lot of these are difficult, what would you suggest in this case?
I think it's not an exact science, and therefore we have to work with our clients to say we can have certain direct measures, which would be satisfaction with the coach, for instance, or we might link it into the performance management for the particular individuals who have been coached. Was there an improvement, for instance, seen in their competency levels? However, I think often it is more apparent in the proxy measures that I mentioned, because if the leader through coaching brings a more humane, for instance, or a more engaging style of leadership, that we will see that eventually reflected in the team satisfaction or the climate satisfaction for that group. So it may not be a quick fix, It's not, I find with coaching, this is perhaps the difficulty. It's not like you have a session with someone and you see the immediate effect. It's a slow burn.
Yeah.
But that's not to say we shouldn't expect an impact, but it may be 6 months to 12 months before we see it. And I think it's a process, because I know, Morella, you've done wonderful work in ADNOC over many years, and you trained up cohorts of internal coaches as well. I mean, what were you doing to manage the expectations of those maybe finance people?
Yeah. Well, a lot of what we did, we actually embedded specific, so we did have the three-partite agreements, meeting with the line managers pre and post. We had pre and post 360s of the individuals involved in coaching programs. We had immediate coaching, evaluation of both the coachee and the coach. So we had a look at all of these measures, all of these measures that we put in place, and use that as a success measure of the coaching. So we did actually embed specific things in place. But I'm now looking at it from the perspective of an external coach, where you walk into organizations that are sometimes haven't really got much in terms of particular tools or surveys, or they haven't done 360s, or it's costly, and you need to then convince senior management that there is an impact as a result of coaching, because they might see it as a luxury expense and not something that they really need to allocate a specific budget to. So I was just asking from that particular perspective. But I guess having been internal and trying to build a coaching culture, it's something that you specifically have to embed to make sure that there are results that are coming out of the coaching.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Linda. Amazing insights. I'm sorry I have to run. I have to pick up my daughter, but thank you so much for
lovely to see you.
Session. Lovely to see you too. Thank you, everyone.
Right, yeah. Thanks a lot. And I'm sorry, I think I lost connection in between for a few minutes and you had to manage on your own. I have a question, Linda. I think that's the last question before we wrap up, is that you talked about post conversations. So when you talk about an organizational context, so what the post conversations will look like?
usually what I would do is on my last session with the coachee, I would ask them, reflective questions around what has been the biggest change for them from the coaching program, what has shifted, what have been their insights, what have they noticed about themselves, and to capture that. And then we would set up the meeting with their line manager. And in setting up the meeting with the line manager, I would invite the line manager to also reflect on that individual and, what have they noticed about their work, about their performance in the period. And then in that conversation, I think you have to create psychological safety so that both sides can be honest. But generally, you find it's extremely positive, where often the manager sees more progress than the individual. I think often we're our own harshest critic. But I usually begin by asking the coachee to present their learnings, insights, and reflections to the manager. And then the manager will respond and build on that. And, it can be done in a 20 to 30 minute conversation. It generally wouldn't take more than that. But it allows also to say what next. So what ongoing support would I need from you, my manager, to keep up my progress?
Right. Thank you very much for that. It was really informative session. Now I'll request Caroline Phillips, a Vice President of ICF Oman chapter, to propose a vote of thanks.
Oh, vote of thanks. I don't think we need that formality, but from the heart, thank you, Linda. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing your experience, your expertise. Truly valuable. I'm a serious cricket fan, and I had to decide, do I want to watch the semi-final or do I want to come on here? And of course, establishing and maintaining agreements, I would like to think it's like taking off an aircraft. And every pilot will say that's the most important part of flying an aircraft. So after that, you're on autopilot. So once again, thank you. And more importantly, thank you each and every one of you for being here. It means a lot to have you all join us on these sessions. Looking forward to more interaction, more contributions, more participation. Essen, as usual, thank you for bringing this to us. Much appreciated. And on that note, have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thanks again. Thanks again, Linda.
Thank you. Good night.
San, Raya, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you. Linda, oh, she left.